Stop what you're doing for a second. Think about the last time you walked into a room and completely forgot why you went in there. Not because you were tired, not because you were distracted, not because you're getting older. It happened because your brain performed a deliberate, measurable neurological operation at the moment you crossed the threshold. It deleted the information on purpose. And the implications of that, for memory, for identity, for how you experience your entire life, are far stranger than a moment of forgetting where you left your keys. In 2006, cognitive psychologist Gabriel Radvansky at the University of Notre Dame was studying something that most researchers considered trivial. Why do people forget things when they change locations? Everyone had noticed it. Nobody had properly studied it. The assumption was simple: distraction. You move, you see new things, the old thought gets pushed out. Radvansky suspected something fundamentally different. Something that went to the core of how the brain constructs not just memory, but experience itself. He designed a series of experiments so clean, so methodologically elegant, that when the results came back, nobody could argue with what they showed. The first experiment was simple. Participants moved through a series of virtual rooms on a computer screen. As they moved, they picked up objects, one per room, and placed them in a virtual box so they couldn't see them. At random moments, they were asked, "What object are you currently carrying?" The question was asked either immediately after picking up the object in the same room or after walking through a doorway into the next room. Same distance traveled, same amount of time elapsed, same object in the box. The only difference, a doorway. Participants who had crossed a doorway forgot significantly more than those who had stayed in the same room. The doorway, not the distance, not the time, was causing the forgetting. Radvansky called this the location updating effect. But the popular name stuck immediately, the Doorstep Effect. Radvansky wasn't satisfied. The virtual environment was clean, but was it real? Did actual physical doorways do the same thing? He ran the experiment again, this time in real physical rooms, real objects, real walking, real doorways. Participants carried real objects from room to room, placed them in real boxes, and were asked to recall them at random intervals. The result was identical. Physical doorways caused the same measurable forgetting as virtual ones. The brain wasn't responding to screens or simulations. It was responding to the concept of a threshold, to the architectural signal that said, "You are entering a new space." And when that signal fired, something else fired with it. Now, Radvansky asked the most important question. If walking through a doorway causes forgetting, does walking back through it restore the memory? This is the experiment that revealed just how deep this mechanism goes. Participants crossed into a new room and forgot an object. Then they were walked back into the original room where they had first picked up the object. And their memory improved. Not because they saw any new cues, not because anything in the environment reminded them, but because the original room, the original spatial context, was itself a retrieval cue for the memory that had been formed there. The memory hadn't been erased. It had been filed under a specific location, in a specific mental chapter, and returning to that chapter partially reopened it. To understand why this happens, we need to go deeper than doorways. Psychologists Jeffrey Sachs and Kenna Swallow at Washington University in St. Louis developed what is now called event segmentation theory. The theory proposes something radical. Your brain does not experience life as a continuous stream. It experiences life as a series of discrete events, chapters, segments, episodes. And it is constantly, automatically, unconsciously monitoring your experience for signals that one event has ended and another has begun. These signals are called event boundaries. A doorway is an event boundary, but so is a change in lighting, a change in sound environment, a shift in conversation topic, standing up from a chair, finishing a meal. The moment a piece of music changes key, every time your brain detects an event boundary, it performs a specific operation. It takes the working memory contents of the current event, everything you were thinking, planning, attending to, and it packages them, files them, archives them as part of the completed event. And it clears the workspace, ready for the new event, fresh, empty, available. This is not a bug. This is the operating system of human consciousness. Why would the brain do this? Because for 200,000 years, changing environments meant changing demands. When your ancestor walked out of the cave and into the forest, the mental priorities of the cave were irrelevant. Inside the cave, fire maintenance, social dynamics, shelter. Outside the cave, predators, food, navigation, weather. A brain that carried the cave's priorities into the forest was a distracted brain. A distracted brain was a dead brain. So the brain evolved a clean handoff mechanism. Cross the threshold, update the context, archive the old, load the new. It was adaptive. It was efficient. It was survival. The problem is that we now live in environments where the old context and the new context are not cave versus forest. They are kitchen versus living room, office versus hallway, bedroom versus bathroom. And the brain doesn't know the difference. It sees a threshold. It fires the reset, regardless of whether you needed that reset. This is not just philosophy. Architects use event segmentation theory to design spaces that feel larger or smaller than they are. More doorways, more segmentation, more perceived space. Open-plan offices were partly designed to reduce event boundaries and maintain continuous cognitive flow. Therapists use it deliberately. Moving a patient from a waiting room to a therapy room is not just logistical. The doorway creates an event boundary, a psychological signal that this space is different, that different rules apply, that it is safe to speak differently here. Some trauma therapists use specific architectural transitions to help patients mentally separate from their daily selves before beginning difficult work. Military psychologists study it in the context of combat to non-combat transitions. Why soldiers struggle to shift mental frameworks when returning home. The event boundary of the doorway home is supposed to signal that context is over. But when the brain has been trained to keep that context permanently active, the threshold stops working, and the soldier brings the war across the doorway into the living room. Writers and filmmakers use it instinctively. Chapter breaks. Fade to black. Every transition in every story is a manufactured event boundary, a signal to the audience that one thing has ended and another is beginning, controlling the audience's memory and attention at the neurological level. Here's where event segmentation theory becomes genuinely unsettling. If your brain segments experience at every event boundary, not just doorways, then the implications go far beyond forgetting your keys. Time research shows that we don't experience time as a continuous flow. We experience it as a sequence of events. This is why an hour in a dentist's chair feels longer than an hour watching a film you love, even though it's the same 60 minutes. The dentist hour contains more perceived event boundaries, more segmentation, more individual units of experience, more time, memory. Studies show that we remember the beginnings and endings of events far better than the middles. This is why you remember the first day of a job and the last day, but not the 10,000 ordinary days in between. Your brain tagged those days as single events, filed them together, compressed them into a single memory unit. Identity, perhaps the most disturbing implication. If your brain constructs your life as a series of segmented events, then the you that exists in each segment is, in some measurable sense, slightly different from the you in the previous segment. Not dramatically different, not unrecognizably different, but the working memory that defines your moment-to-moment consciousness, the thoughts you're currently holding, the intentions driving your behavior, the emotional context coloring your perception, resets at every event boundary. You are not one continuous self moving through time. You are a sequence of slightly different selves connected by memory and narrative. The doorway doesn't just make you forget where you put your glasses. The doorway is the mechanism by which your brain decides where one version of you ends and another begins. Here is what Radvansky's doorway and Zach's event segmentation theory ultimately reveal. Your experience of being alive, the sense of a continuous self moving through a coherent world, is a construction. Your brain doesn't record reality. It edits it. It chapters it. It files it. It compresses decades into narratives and hours into single memory units. The life you remember is not the life you lived. It is the version your brain decided to keep, organized by the thresholds you crossed, the events that began and ended, the working memory that was active in the moment something mattered enough to encode. And most of what happened, the vast majority of your minutes, hours, and days, is gone. Not because it was unimportant, because your brain decided at some threshold that the chapter was closed. The next time you walk into a room and forget why you came, don't be frustrated. You just watched your brain do exactly what it has been doing for 200,000 years. The question is not, why did I forget? The question is, what else has my brain decided to close the chapter on without asking me first? What relationships? What ambitions? What versions of yourself did your brain quietly archive the moment you crossed a threshold you didn't notice? And is it possible to walk back through? In 1968, a year after the assassination of Martin Luther King, a third-grade teacher in Iowa named Jane Elliott decided her students needed to understand something that no textbook could teach. She divided her class of 8-year-olds into 2 groups, not by ability, not by behavior, by eye color. Blue eyes, superior, intelligent, important. Brown eyes, inferior, slow, less than. She didn't explain why. She just said it was true, and then she watched what happened. By the end of the first day, children who had been friends since kindergarten were taunting each other. The inferior group's academic performance dropped measurably. The superior group became crueler than any 8-year-old had any right to be, in one day, with children using nothing but a label. Jane Elliott didn't run this experiment to publish a paper. She ran it because she wanted her students to feel, in their bodies, not just their minds, what discrimination does to a human being. The footage exists. The children grew up, and what they said decades later about what that one day did to them is something you need to hear.